True crimers, welcome to Break the Case. I'm your host. I'm Jen Coffindaffer. For those of you who have never joined us, I retired after 28 years in federal law enforcement, 25 years as a special agent with the FBI. And I started this platform specifically to bring in a lot of my colleagues of criminal psychologists, retired special agents, profilers, et cetera, to really help analyze cases that they were involved in and cases that are ongoing. That was kind of my vision. We try to put out an episode every month from those interviews. I actually have a backlog of interviews that have been completed and waiting on editing for those interviews. So we always have True Crime Tuesday and almost always have Missing Monday. We missed this Monday. I have been traveling and I'm so glad. I'm kind of feeling super refreshed and ready to get back at it. And I want to welcome everybody who's here. Those of you who are members, thank you so much for taking time out of your Tuesday evening to join us. To my mods who are the best in the business, thanks for helping keep all the conversation, hopefully interesting and exciting and, a focal point of hopefully what you all are here to discuss, and that is true crime. So without further ado, I want to get to our case at hand today. Obviously, there's a lot of cases going on that are at various stages, but Caleb Harris was a case that first came to my attention right when he went missing. He went missing back in March, and Chris Cuomo actually took a huge interest in the Caleb Harris case. Caleb Harris, 21 years old, he went missing from Corpus Christi, Texas. He was a second-year student there. He lived in this beautiful off-campus apartment building with his buddies. They had recently acquired a dog, not anyone individually, but, they were kind of the house guys with a dog, which, by the way, happens quite often. My son did the same thing. So boys like dogs. Actually, I love dogs. People love dogs. So anyway, this particular evening was a Sunday evening. Now, this was a Sunday evening that was not untypical of any night there in this apartment for the boys, other than they had just acquired this dog that belonged to an elderly woman who just felt she couldn't take good care of the dog. So I'm not trying to focus on the dog, but a lot of people have focused on the dog and the fact there was film footage at 11 or so that evening in the parking lot with everybody playing with the dog. Caleb Harris, had the dog, went on a kind of a walk, but then took the dog back. He ended up at 3 a.m. Making a couple of snaps, one to his sister, one to his good friend in Colorado, and then literally disappeared until, unfortunately, he was recently found at a wastewater lift treatment facility. Now, I know some of you have seen this online, but for those of you who don't know about this, this is actually where sewage is treated with very heavy chemicals, and it's treated to make it less toxic, if you will. And that's what this facility did. So specifically, there's these pools that exist. They have a locked cover over top of them. In fact, the sewage treatment plants are themselves very locked up. There's fencing, there's locked gates, everything's padlocked in. Why? Well, first of all, sewage gas is very, very toxic. The chemicals used to treat sewage is extremely toxic. My understanding is really inhaling that and, of course, having it on your body would immediately cause absolutely disastrous effects. So you can imagine the condition that Caleb's body was in after all of these months and being found in such a pool, a waste treatment pool with all of these chemicals and so on and so forth. So his body was found. It was found by sewage treatment workers. And we have studied this case. We've talked about this case, as I said, for months now. And there's kind of a lot to go over tonight. I wanted to touch on some of the main highlights. I took some pretty copious notes after my discussions today, and I wanted to go over that a little bit. So, the general premise, apparently, by the police, which this case falls into the venue of the Corpus Christi Police Department. What does that mean? When a body is found or goes missing in a particular area, the local department has venue. And that is in all cases, unless there's other circumstances that complicate that. Circumstances could be if the body was found in that jurisdiction but came across state lines and the murder was actually committed someplace else but crossed state lines and was found in a particular jurisdiction, that thing could be federal jurisdiction. If it's in the jurisdiction, but that jurisdiction is a national park, such as the Grand Tetons, like where Gabby Petito was found, that falls under federal jurisdiction. If it falls under, for instance, a base, an Air Force base or a naval base or something like that, that falls under the Naval Investigative Service and potentially the Bureau as well. If it happens on a plane, train, or a boat, that falls under federal jurisdiction. So there's all these caveats, but suffice it to say, in the huge majority of cases, if people are missing or found in a particular area, the locals have jurisdiction. They have venue, meaning they have venue for anything legally and anything law enforcement related that's going to happen there. A lot of people get very frustrated because they think, well, nothing's happening. The case is moving forward. Why can't the FBI take over? Why can't the state police take over? And that's the long, or hopefully the short answer to what could be an elongated answer. And that is locals have first right to venue, except for those caveats I gave. So in this case, the Corpus Christi Police Department has always had and continues to have venue over the Caleb Harris case. Now, what recently happened on Friday was the autopsy was released to the family and to the police. Actually, I think I posted, it was well before Friday, because the ME's office actually released the results earlier than that to media. So I had those results quite early in terms of what occurred. I just want to say, I do think it's a travesty when something like this happens from the family's standpoint. I know the family learned about the autopsy results from watching television, and my understanding is the police department did as well. This mirrored a little bit the Riley Strain situation a little bit, and I could tell you it was hard on the family to hear that the autopsy was out in advance of them having a copy. But it's the medical examiner's office. They are supposed to and should conduct business separately and independent from a police department. I do wonder about this sort of breakdown from in terms of communication between the police department and the medical examiner's office, but certainly within their right and their purview as the medical examiners to release autopsy results when they want to. And in a sense, it's really up to them. It's their report after all. So we're not going to get too much into the autopsy report other than to say what I reported on Twitter, which for those of you who are on Twitter, I really try to give numerous case updates every morning. And throughout the day, to the degree that I can, I actually have a case that is getting ready for adjudication. And so behind the scenes, I'm feverishly working on that case because it's up and I need to get my business handled with that. But in any event, in this particular case, I went and I highlighted all the points of interest, if you will, the points that I thought were important about the autopsy. One was the toxicology. And for those of you who don't know, the toxicology was negative. When I see negative, what that means to me typically is it means negative for toxins, negative for drugs, negative for illicit, drugs within the system. That could mean cocaine, that could mean heroin, also anything like poisons, arsenic or some other poison. So it was negative. It was negative for chemicals that could be involved in his death, essentially. So we found that out. We also found out that his body was in a severe case of decay and decomposition. It was described as skeletal remains. So we know that, unfortunately, Caleb was unrecognizable, and obviously, just sad situation for the family and for law enforcement to help discern what happened to Caleb, right? Because anytime you don't have a body that is fully and completely intact in terms of having organs and having all the body parts to work with, it is difficult to make a lot of determination. So unfortunately, much of what was discovered was undetermined. In other words, the results, the findings ended up being undetermined. That means the manner of death, which is whether it was suicide, homicide, accidental, was determined to be undetermined because they can't tell due to the state of the remains that were found. That's very unfortunate. In addition, obviously, it stands to reason that the cause was also unable to be determined. In other words, things like gunshot wounds, stabbing, blunt force trauma, that was also not determined. But it was determined that there were no signs of obvious homicide, if you will. In other words, his skull did not have a gunshot wound. For instance, another case that many of us know very well is the case of Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie. And in the Brian Laundrie case, it was clear they were able to rule the manner of death as suicide because they had a skull and they could see from the entrance and exit wound that they believed that was an impact wound and consistent with suicide. Although I'll always say Brian Laundrie was right-handed and the bullet went from left to right. And I will always maintain that when one is making the most important shot of their life, it is very odd to shoot with your offhand. But I don't want to digress. I just want to say there were no obvious signs of homicide and everything was ruled sort of as undetermined. And that was through what the media outlets disclosed last week. Now, how in the world did he get into the sewage treatment plant? We talked about it before, talked about getting somebody on here that specifically works at a sewage treatment plant. I have not found such a person yet to come on and explain, but I do have a lot more information. So in the field, which again was a cornfield, it's funny, I mentioned it was cornfield, and a lot of people said, cornfield? There's no cornfields in Texas. Well, there are many cornfields in Texas. Texas is a huge state, and there's cornfields, and there was a cornfield that was in between his apartment building and the wastewater management treatment center. So it was literally within eyeshot, what I would call sort of a city block away, where you could see from exactly the apartment building to this waste facility where his body was found. He was last seen on this little bridge that was across from his apartment building and over top of a kind of a drainage ditch. Now, right when he went missing, there was no real lag time. The minute he was reported missing, officers, police, dive teams, dogs, people were out there in law enforcement, and just the whole community came together to try to find Caleb Harris. And I firsthand, well, secondhand knowledge know this because a dear friend of mine, we were what we call first office agents, FOAs together in the Houston division, and he lives right over in that area. So I gave him a call and I said, listen, can you please go over there if you're not doing anything else and you have a moment? I just want to get a lay of the land. So he sent me a lot of pictures of this was the morning after, of the complex, of what was going on there, of dive teams in this shallow water, of people conducting searches, grid searches of the, helicopters and support for this thing. It was really impressive. So this was a great search effort that was done, very contiguous with his disappearance. It wasn't anything like happens so often where somebody's reported missing and the police say, listen, yeah, he probably just wandered off, or he's with a girlfriend, or no, this wasn't like that. The Corpus Christi Police Department, to their credit, took this very seriously, and they came out there and they reported. So in any event, they searched and no Caleb. And in fact, no signs of Caleb. Now, one thing that I found very interesting is in this cornfield, there was a cover, a manhole cover, if you will, for sewage, not for wastewater. And I got a lot more information regarding that. Okay. So I want to show you this photo. This was taken today of the manhole cover. Our manhole. I want you all to take a look at this. I hope you can see it. My windows may be causing issues, but we see these all the time right now. I want to make it clear that right here, I don't know if you can see that, but the cement that you see there surrounding that cover was not there and neither was that cone the night that all happened. That's been put in after. I think it was put in July 18th, and it was added to provide increased security around that cover. But when searchers were there searching that field multiple times, not just one time through, multiple times through, came back later, searched multiple times through, that manhole cover was never off. Also, the dimensions of that manhole cover are 24 inches diameter. Okay, so 24 inches diameter. Caleb is 6 foot tall and was somewhere around just under 200 pounds. He was a big, athletic man, I should say. So 21-year-old man. So it wasn't like this was a small child. This wasn't a toddler. This wasn't a skinny sixth grader. This was a grown man. And Caleb was, for those of you who don't know, an outdoorsman. He understood the outdoors. He was a hunter. He was a fisherman. He knew how to get along in the outdoors. For those of you who don't know, when he disappeared, he was barefoot. You can clearly see on the video that he was barefoot when he was out there playing with that dog at 11 or so at night. In addition, he wore an extremely large shoe, a shoe that his roommates did not wear. I think it was a 13, super large shoe. and his shoes were present and accounted for. So for those of you who are farmers, I grew up on a farm. I grew up on a farm where we had soybeans and we had corn. When I say corn, this isn't corn on the cob like you eat. It's feed corn for cattle. This is the type of corn that was being raised in this field. In a feed corn field, in this particular stage, it was about a few feet high. So it was new corn. It wasn't the tall corn. It was newer corn. And those leaves of corn, for those of you who ever had to detassel corn when you were younger, they used to do that. For those of you who ever worked on a farm, corn is sharp. The leaves are very sharp. And the dirt is not like potting soil. It's not potting soil for those of you who garden. This is thick, big bundles of ground. There's spiders, there's snakes, there's rats, there is all sorts of dangerous areas in any field because it's fairly natural. And so I can tell you, anybody with any lick of common sense, and certainly Caleb had that, would not be walking around barefoot in a cornfield. Now, I have some more pictures to show you how deep into this cornfield this particular drain was. It's really deep into this cornfield. So hopefully you can see this. So here's the, well, I'm trying to make, there's the cone. Right underneath my forefinger is the lid to the septic entrance. And you'll see there's, the field right there. It's deep into that field. So it would be extremely rare for Caleb, and I would submit, I'm not buying, that Caleb just decided to walk in the middle of this cornfield, and for some reason, the big heavy lid that covers the sewage treatment 24-inch opening just happened to be opened, and he just somehow stumbled into it. And remember, there were no workers. All workers said there were no open manholes when they were out there. Now, a couple things I found interesting. There were about 6 to 7 other manholes in this area for sewage to run through. Those are on the grid, if you will. Okay, so the city knew about them. The city checked them. They're in this diagram or blueprint, if you will, of the sewage drains, of the sewage system that goes to this treatment facility. But this one wasn't in that. I found that interesting. This one's sort of off the grid from those others. So it wasn't something that was normally checked. Okay. But again, all these searchers, everybody had been there, and there was no reports of the lid being off this drain, I'll call it a drain, until the mid part of April. And that's when, I believe it was a farmer that reported that the lid that you see there in that picture I showed was missing. Now, what happened was, the next day after the report came in, the police went out there. There was quite a bit of water, and they drained that water from that entrance point. And then they also went and did a search of the ponds. No Caleb. That was mid-April. But that lid was off. Okay. So what I think law enforcement kind of believes what happened was that he could have fallen in that drain or in that manhole gone down now. I just want you to picture this. It's 24 inches in diameter, but it narrows to 15 inches. So if you take a ruler, think about 15 inches, 3 inches past a ruler, about yay. And then at that, as the funnel narrows, there is not a great exactly, I got more information about this, but it's described to me as kind of like a crossbar or bars that keep large chunks of anything from going down there. That could be an animal, that could be somebody throwing something down there that's large, because then they can't treat the water. So they want to catch any large objects or things in this crossbar at the 15 inches, as it goes down only 15 inches, okay? Now, my understanding is that sewage treatment water, the chemicals used in that, again, are so very toxic. So you got sewer gas that's toxic, and the treatment chemicals are super toxic. We saw and we knew that the searchers, the law enforcement crew that looked for him, were in full hazmat, head to toe, and they had to be protected. So this was an extremely dangerous environment, and certainly, as I mentioned before, would have, grave consequence to any sort of body that would have been put in there. Okay. It's also important to point out that this system, the sewage system of pipes and drains, was closed. This is very, very important to me. What do I mean by that? Well, it's a closed sewage system that takes the sewage that flows underneath from homes and businesses and everything else to this treatment plant to be treated. It's not storm water. So for those of you who saw that little creek he was over, storm water doesn't go through there. It's not piped into there. This is a closed sewage treatment facility and piping. Now, this is important. While it's closed, the actual pipes are porous, meaning the materials they're made with, because it's so old, back in the 50s, I'm told, is the porousness when there are huge rains, something huge. I mean, like hurricane, tropical storm type forces, that the pressure of the groundwater, and I've actually seen this in person. I've seen this happen where the groundwater is so massive, the pressure from the groundwater, that it can actually come through concrete. I've personally watched that groundwater, because concrete is porous, go through concrete and penetrate concrete. Same idea here. These pipes that are part of the sewage treatment plant are fine as long as they don't have that huge pressure from an event like a tropical storm or a hurricane. Well, interestingly enough, there was just that. Right before Caleb was found, not right before, but before Caleb was found. And so a lot of thought has gone into the fact that perhaps he was lodged in this skinny pipe, again, in not intact, and pushed, remnants pushed where he was ultimately found. That's the thought process. My issue, I believe all of that. I believe he was put there. I believe that because this was a off the grid type manhole that was in this cornfield, that normally people aren't walking around in a cornfield. I believe personally, from what I know and what I understand to this point, that he was put there. I just don't buy especially now we know no toxins. At least that's what the toxicology said. And common sense, I just don't believe he stumbled into a manhole that, by the way, according to all the workers, wasn't lidless, wasn't without the lid when they searched for him the next day. So I can make nothing more of it than somebody put him there. How he died, we don't know. But I believe, in other words, was it an accident? Was it a homicide? We don't know. But I'm not buying that he stumbled in to this manhole, to this sewage line. I'm not buying that. I want to know if you all are. We love to have takes on here. All of you know a lot of the information as well. It's a true crime community. Definitely want to hear your takes, and I'm going to go to those right away here. I just want to make sure I don't miss anything else. His family has some really exciting plans. I say exciting because anytime I see movement in a case, anytime I see direction being taken, a positive movement towards solving the case, I get excited about it because Caleb deserves justice. Caleb was a 21-year-old that ended up in parts in a sewage treatment plant. Let's let that sink in. That's tough. He deserves justice. How did he get there? Who put him there? Again, I think it's great that Corpus Christi PD got right on the case, did their search efforts. I'll be interested to hear their official opinion. But I find it very concerning. Oh, thank you, Sunshine Susie. First of all, I love the name Sunshine Susie. Anything with sunshine in it, I love. I'm feeling very sunny about a lot of things, not about this case. But I just want to thank you. Let me read what you have to say. Maybe the person or people who took his life opened up the cover to make it look as if it was an accident. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? In April, we find out the cover is off. Does that mean maybe that's when he was discarded there? I mean, that makes some sense to me, but they didn't find him in April. How long was that cover off, though? It was reported in April. Was it really off for a long time? In other words, after search efforts, after that had all been cleared, was that when maybe it happened and they didn't put the cover back on? Let me make sure I don't miss anything else on my, I wanted to say this too. And we'll talk about it more with Randy is going to join us next Tuesday with new updates and new information. I'm looking forward to hosting Randy Harris, Caleb's father. I've invited him a few times. Obviously has not been up to it. When I spoke to him today, what really choked him up, and if any of you live in the Corpus area, they have put together the most thoughtful and heartwarming, I'm going to show you a picture of it, memorial for him at that bridge where he was last seen. Sorry, I'm just looking for this really quick. And it really, really touched Randy. In fact, I'm going to show you this picture of it for those of you who haven't seen it, and I'll post it on my Twitter too. But where he got choked up was, I'm going to see if I can exactly see him. I can't see him. But there were kids, little kids, that put their fishing rods there. And when I was talking to Randy, he needed a moment. Forensic Intent, thank you so much. $8. Fine, I like this channel and your expertise. I appreciate it, Forensic Intent. By the way, I don't want to digress again, but Forensic Intent, for those of you who want a channel that focuses on facts, that brings guests that bring facts and experience, and from a law enforcement and psychologist perspective, forensic intent. Give them a look. They're great. And I've been blessed to be on that channel, and I definitely always want to support it. But sorry to digress, back to the conversation of Caleb. This family is so spiritual. They are so religious in their faith. And I mean, this is like on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being you go to church on Easter and Christmas, and 10 being you're constantly at church and your life revolves around the church. They're tens. So I only bring that up to say that their faith has gotten them through a lot of this. I really look up to that, the faith that has kept them going, because I can tell you, if I were in their shoes, I can't imagine that I could keep the strength that they have kept through this whole situation, especially after Caleb was found. So anyway, there's this beautiful memorial there. And he went to go look at that, and I think maybe place some flowers as well. So the bottom line is that is kind of my synopsis for now. Randy will be with us next Tuesday for further comments and further updates to disclose. I really am hoping to have Assistant Chief Green on soon. He's a very devoted police officer. He wants to get to the bottom of what happened to Caleb. And, I think he's working hard to try to make sense of this riddle. I'm going to look at your comments. I'm going to take 5 comments. So let's see. This says, Jen, they need to investigate every single known criminal and sex offender in the area. Somebody did this to Caleb, and they had to have killed him not to get caught. So this is such an interesting point. And we'll talk about this more with Randy. I want to leave, some things for Randy to talk about. But basically, yes, I think they really need to be looking into who might have a pattern of victimizing people in that area that might have a criminal record. And I think that that's so important to completely get them off the possibility of them doing this to Caleb. Because we do have a finite window. We know when his phone, wasn't working. We don't have his phone, by the way. It's never been found. That's another clue to me that this was a homicide or an accident, and then a discarding of the body, because his phone would be with him. So for that reason, I also can't believe that somebody didn't put him there. Yes, Enlightened Fawn, and I like your handle. Yes, it is great to hear about this makeshift memorial. From my understanding, the outpouring of love, support for the family in that Corpus Christi area has been amazing. It has been unwavering, and I'm really so glad to hear that, because so often people forget, people tend to move on from case to case to case. I'm seeing this case through. It's kind of like the Summer Wells case. I bring her up all the time because even though it's, a cold case that is going nowhere, it would seem, at some point it's going to rear its head, and we're going to keep mentioning her name amongst many others. Michael Vaughn, obviously Sebastian Rogers, and so many others, cases that are still yet unsolved. Let's see. Mandy Strong. Yes, Jen, this doesn't feel like a first-time offender. This was horrific. Look, it's definitely horrific. Anyone who could put somebody in a sewage treatment plant. Now, again, is it possible that he could have wandered into that cornfield while he was waiting for his Uber Eats? Remember, that's what he was doing out there. And stepped into this manhole, and nobody saw him the next morning with a grate 15 inches. I just can't buy it. guess it could be possible, but very improbable. Brooke Taylor, I feel like he witnessed something, someone in trouble. That's the only thing that makes any sense of him leaving suddenly without shoes. Well, I will say this. He liked to walk around without shoes. I don't know if you know people like that. I know a lot of people like that. When I was younger, I hated to have my shoes on. I still don't like to have them on, but when I go outside, I put them on. But you all probably know people, have relatives, friends that love to walk around shoeless. That was Caleb. We could see him playing with the dog in the parking lot on asphalt without shoes. So for him, it wasn't unusual. But what would be unusual, and what would not make sense, is at 3 o'clock in the morning, unless you were intoxicated, which we got a negative tox report. It doesn't make sense that he would be out in the middle of this field, um, shoeless, walking around, and just happen to fall in a manhole um, that should be covered. By all accounts, was covered. Let's see. Dixie Doodle. Mike MC1 had a good point earlier about disregarded being important. I think that is important. Look, I'm not sure I'm believing this disregarded ping. Um, I need to have a cyber expert on. I have one in mind to bring on. He just retired from the FBI. Um, and I think I'm going to try to get a hold of him, circle back with him, and get him on and see if he can talk to us about disregarded pings, because I don't know that, I'm not sure ghost pings are really a thing. All right, let's see. I just want to thank each and every one of you again for joining us on this Tuesday, True Crime Tuesday. Thank you so much. My voice is a little hoarse. As some of you may know, I had a huge weekend this weekend. I've played tennis for years, not as a child, but as an adult. And I'm a 4.0 rated for those of you who play. And my team, who has been trying to make it to nationals for over 10 years, we finally made it. It's a really big deal. About 1% of all USTA tennis players at all levels ever get to go. And I was screaming so loud, my voice and my throat is sore. And I kind of lost my voice. So we skipped Missing Monday, but we may do a rewind Wednesday and touch on Sebastian Rogers and a couple other cases I want to bring up that are missing cases. But I just want to say thank you all for joining. And until next time, may justice be served.